Hello, everybody. Welcome to Beyond Evil, where we will be discussing how to play evil characters and, playing safely at the table and keeping all your friends. Let's start with introductions. Let's start with Syn. Syn, hello. Do you want to introduce yourself? Yes.
Oh, me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, hey everyone. I'm Cinziak. It is going to be a very interesting panel with these people. I think. I guess as far as where to find me, I am on the Twitters and on Twitch at Cinziak. Um, Equally as interesting to pronounce, but spelled the same way in both places.
John.
Hey, I'm John. You can find me on the Twitters at Ryomasa, RY0. Somebody has my name. Damn it. MASA. I do a bunch of work using LARP and tabletop gaming for therapeutic purposes. That's actually what my master's is. I'm in a clinical mental health counseling program for it. And I also helped start the Academy of Virtual Role-Playing Arts at the university I work at, which is a research lab dedicated to that specific premise, as well as using like the rest of gaming, so video gaming, and then also specifically with a focus on virtual reality as therapeutic tools. So that's kind of where I'm coming from here.
Werewolf.
Hey, you can find me at Werewolf Feels on Twitter. I'm a community organizer, a convention admin for Breakout Con. The next one is hopefully happening March 19th to the 21st, 2021. But you don't have to catch me on there. Instead, you can check out Asians Represent, and I will be on their ongoing critical reads of both Kindred of the East, dear God, and also Al-Qadim, which was the setting for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. But before I let anyone else have the mic, just a reminder that you should probably go on Gen Con's website, click your name, click the schedule, click this event, and then click send ticket to event host. Please.
Yes, please get a ticket if you don't have one already. And I am Wild, Wild Engineer, Paul. And I play RPGs, and I like making evil characters. You can find me on at Wild Engineer on Twitter, where I will be on various shows that I might tweet about. All right, so before we start, I do want to get across that we are not going to be telling you how to make an evil character. This is about table safety and being able to play an evil character with your friends, with people at the table, and making sure that you're doing it safely and responsibly. One thing that we will not be going over is sexual assault. We will not be discussing it or answering any questions on it. So, how should we start? Does anybody want to go over any examples they have on times where they've made characters that were divisive and evil?
Such an open-ended question. Like, well, all of us have them, I think.
Yes, I mean, I think that's the whole reason that we're here. I've played everything from, just your average, everyday, terrible person who's part of a good team to, a fascist. I'm not a fascist in real life, I should say that. But I've played a lot of wide and varied characters. I can't say I've enjoyed them all, and we're going to talk about why and what you can do to help fix that, and why you should probably listen to yourself in general. But I will say this: we wouldn't be here if we didn't somewhat enjoy playing evil, and I don't think either would the people in the chat. Or at the very least, you're a GM and have to.
How about you, John?
Yeah, I mean, like I've run the gamut from I've run the gamut from like morally ambiguous to straight up mustache twirling, like narcissistic evil. And it is one of those things for me where yes, I enjoy it. I'm a GM at heart. Like I GM more than I play significantly. And one of the things that you learn as a GM and over time is that the best kinds of evil that you draw on, the best kinds that you can play, are the ones that everyone in your party will hate in some way or another. And if you take it a step further, they're the ones that they will love to hate, because that makes a game significantly more fun and creates a lot of investment in the characters and the story that you're trying to tell. The issue with that is that the easiest and often sometimes the quickest and best way to get someone to hate someone is to know what buttons to push in your players, and to really know what will get them like angry and riled up and annoyed through their characters. And that means you have to do it really well, otherwise you're just sitting there pissing off a bunch of your friends for several hours. And that can be really important because of the way that we game and the way that we interact with people, and the fact that our games, we can say that, well, once we all leave the table, it's all back to normal and everything's great, but that isn't always the case. And it's really important to acknowledge that when you're doing the kind of stuff that like we enjoy doing, which is playing characters that will piss off other characters and or other people.
Syn, what examples do you have?
Most of my experience in playing evil characters has been, the more I thought about it, the more I was like, oh yeah, I guess they kind of were, now that I think about it. Because they're the characters that have, rather than just being intentionally, like they're wearing like purple and green and long flowing capes, and therefore you absolutely know that they're evil, tend to be either more insidious people or people who have just, like picked a particular ambition that they have, and it's like, everything else can go out of the window except for this one thing, and I kind of don't care about what happens to everybody else in the process. And that has led to some really interesting places. Being in Star Wars games and then being like, hey, I'm a Sith teacher or like a Sith Lord or something like that, kind of leads places when you have like a whole class of people to guide. So we'll get into that later.
Yes. And my example is I tend to play a lot of Call of Cthulhu, and I have found for games like that, my characters are not good people. I mean, I've played characters that I myself have hated, and I'm like, why am I going down this path? I hate it, everyone hates it. But at the same time, we all still kind of enjoyed it because we all knew what was going on. And so that's kind of what we're looking to explore here, how to be able to do all that stuff and, make sure that you're not destroying your table. Right. So, hang on. Where do we want to start? Let's start generally with safety tools. How did we go about, like, from starting the character, getting on board with your table, with what you were doing, and continuing throughout. Does anybody want to?
Yeah. So starting from like the GM perspective, obviously, is where I'm going to start first, just because that's what I'm most comfortable, and I'll move to player as I go. But as a GM, your responsibility is, so you are a little bit more responsible at you are at a table, like all of you are players at a table, but as someone who's running the game, you're a little bit more responsible, because people expect to be able to come into a game and play. By nature, you have a little bit of power. You have a little bit of responsibility to go with that as well, to quote a comic book, but it means that you need to be constantly aware of your players. Like, you need to be aware of them, and your entire job is really keeping an eye on players as you're doing this thing, seeing what gets, seeing like what sort of what moves them, where people start to feel uncomfortable, whether that uncomfortability is actually being uncomfortable or not. And that's important to tell, because, right, like, there is a lot of people who play who, like, we get angry or like sad or screamy or any of those combinations of things, and if you ask us, we're like, nah, this is great, continue. But the only way you can check with those things is to really sit down and say, to what extent am I trying to do this? And to what extent are other people willing to go with me to do that kind of stuff? So safety tools like the TTRPG safety checklist, it's free. Go get it. You don't really have an excuse not to, frankly. Like, you can just get it on the internet. Super useful to have. Checking in with your players, like I sort of like check in, see how everyone is doing, either post game or like during breaks, if we take breaks, if the sessions are long enough. And then like talk to your players about if there's stuff that's off limits. Like, hey, is there anything you don't, especially in you, like some people can start to feel like the safety checklists and all the other stuff is work, and a lot of people don't come to TTRPGs to do work, which is an understandable feeling and like an instinct, and I get that. Frame it in the ways of story. That tends to help. Of what kind of stories do you want to see? What kind of stories do you not want to tell? Like, are there things that happen to NPCs that you don't like? Are there things that happen to your PC you don't want to happen? And that will get people thinking kind of about what the story they want to tell with that character is. But also it'll tend to, I find it does a lot of work in switching people out of like the actor mindset of, oh, I'm just playing this character and everything that happens, to a bit more of a directorial one where like, no, you have some input in this story, because there's really no point in us being here if you're not interested in what's going on, right? And if it's some people, they're like, oh, I just want to be an audience to a cool story, and that's what I want to do. Cool. Play it light and easy with them, because they'll be happy with what you do, because they're just here to have a good time. You don't need to push it further really to get that kind of thing and that kind of response for them. If their level of interaction is, I'm just here to enjoy a story, you don't have to push it much harder than them.
Right. How are you, Werewolf? How does safety work with a lot of your characters and what games you've been in?
I mean, it's really about, so at the beginning, it's important to talk about where the character is going, you think, and where you want to see the character go. I always think that at the beginning of like anything, you should really talk about, okay, I'm seeing the character roughly this, especially if you're going for one session or two. If it's long term, obviously that's a bit more difficult. But in that case, it's really important to focus on how to keep that conversation ongoing. Because even in game, like if you're playing evil, think of it like playing a LARP. You always want to be in constant contact with who you're interacting with, and like the player, and saying, hey, is this okay? Because the last thing you want to do is, in game murder someone's family, and not have that discussion with them. Like, are you, as a player, comfortable with me doing that to you, my character doing that to your character? It's about really communication. And if you're going to play someone who does despicable things, communication is going to be a tool that you're going to have to learn. You're going to have to learn quickly. I understand that many people do consider it work, and people don't want to do work when they come to play. But here's the thing. This isn't film or television. I want to, as a former actor myself and someone who studied it quite a lot, this isn't theater in which you already have a script, which means that nobody knows what's coming next, which means that no one's consent to what's coming next, which means it's responsible to actually make sure that they do. It's an ongoing conversation that's going to happen as you continue to improvise what your character and their character and how you're going to respond to their character is going to do. And what I'd suggest right now is that if you're having difficulty keeping communication, then maybe playing an evil character is not necessarily for you.
Yes. Syn?
Oh no, go right ahead. I was like, ooh, the intensity of that agreement right there about, being an evil character requires a lot of communication, and being like, I really do have to think about unless everybody at the table is evil, right? Unless like every single person at the table is evil. And even then I have to be a lot more careful, because I'm prone to doing things that may or may not be harmful, even if I don't intend for it to. Then like being any other kind of character. And if you're not willing to take on the responsibility that requires in terms of, you know, communicating with people, then don't do it. Like, just don't do it.
Right. Yeah, for one of the characters I was playing, they were like even in terms of society, they were just a bad person. They were abusive, manipulative. They couldn't even be considered an anti-hero. Like there was no way anybody should root for them unless they were a truly horrible person. But that was my character, and I was playing with friends, people I considered friends, and every step of the way of playing this character, I was afraid that I was going to accidentally step on someone's toes or someone's lines, some of the boundaries. So like before every game, in the middle of when we were taking breaks, at the end of every game, I was making sure to stay in communication with everyone, be like, hey, if I said anything or if this feels like it's going in a direction where it's going to be uncomfortable or possibly even hurt you, I need to know, because sure, it's going this direction, but I can stop it right here, right now. I can wreck on this. I can say that never happened. If that's what makes you safe, then I can do it. And that's what you need to be able and willing to do to play these kinds of characters. You can't have a definite definition or idea of who the character is and not be able to move around with what it can be, or exactly what direction they need to go in.
Yeah, I think it's about, like, in the very general sense, open with safety, continue on with safety, end with safety. And yes, you should be doing that as any character in any RPG ever. But when you are playing someone who might antagonize the PCs even as you are protagonizing with them, it is always more important for you than it is for anyone else at the table, because of the things you can do. And to be fair, it's not like you always have to be antagonizing someone, right? You can join up with PCs for very selfish reasons, but the sort of secrets you keep or the plans you're doing or whatever, those will come into play, and you need to make sure that your players are aware of that. Even as the characters are blindsided and freaking out, which, yes, is a lot of fun.
I guess I can bring this up. What was brought up in chat was that the point of evil characters is to push boundaries. And what I see is that, yes, the character is pushing boundaries. My character was definitely pushing boundaries. But when you get to the point of you're pushing people's boundaries where they no longer want to play with you, or where they're afraid to speak to you because you're hurting them and you don't realize that's where we want to avoid. It's like that's where that communication comes in handy.
Yep.
It's like pushing boundaries isn't the issue. The issue is how those boundaries affect who you're playing with. And you don't know exactly how it's affecting the people around you because you're not them. Only they know what's affecting them. And sometimes they don't even know their own boundaries until you happen to mention it. It's one of those things that until it happens, sometimes people don't realize it. That's where safety tools come in handy. It's like people's like, oh, shoot, I didn't realize that hurt me or that I had feelings about this until that just happened.
Yeah, the idea is to push characters' boundaries. Okay. Yeah, this is a really good clarification, right? The idea that you want to be able to do is to push characters' boundaries. You want to be able to push how they react in story to the character that you are playing. The difficulty with that, right, is that there is still a person behind that character, right? There's still somebody playing that character who is going to do those things. It is really fun to push a character's boundaries, and in fact, some of the best antagonism you can do as someone playing someone evil is to like poke a character consistently over and over and over with the fact that you exist. However, the problem is that because some of the best evil is targeted in a way to make people react to you, because that's kind of the fun of playing that tension. You're going to be doing a lot of antagonizing people, whether you like it or not, because you're consistently stimulating their character or forcing them to make decisions or forcing them to think about you or forcing them to react to you. And that can be a lot of fun if everybody's on board for that. but there are too many times where even if you're not playing evil, even if you're just playing a character with a specific personality or a quirk, where you can watch, you can see there are horror stories everywhere of tables dissolving just because someone cannot stand the way somebody is playing a character, and you need and you cannot push a boundary if you don't know the boundary exists. The only thing you're doing at that point is walking through them or crossing them, because you don't know where to stop, right? And that is, yeah. And again, also, like, we're talking, the reason why is because it's very easy to push character boundaries, because for most intents and purposes, everything that you do, that is, like, most characters in general, if you just look at the big trend, like, some of them are assholes, but they're not like evil. They're usually like, they're like usually kind of self-interested, maybe a little reluctant hero type, but people tend to play heroes or anti-heroes. Like, that's kind of where you tend to get. And the minute you start doing like evil, like purely self-interested, like, morally ambiguous, no fucks given, you tend to end up at odds with the characters that you're playing with, just kind of by statistics. And that is important, because you need to know, like, you're here to tell a fun story. You're not there to derail everyone else's experience. And if nobody is anticipating or wants you to play evil in a way, then you're just gonna have like a bad time. Just like a quick example, sort of general example. I had a friend of mine who really hates PvP. Like, they play tabletop role playing games the way they play like cooperative video games, where they kind of expect everyone to be on the same page and play to the group's benefit, kind of by their as a general rule. And that's totally fine, but I cannot play an evil character in a game with that person, because that ruins their day in a way. Like, they don't come here to play that game, right? And so, like, I need to know that before I set up. And so, like, at that point, playing an evil character who, if I really wanted to play an evil character and not just someone who is there in the group out of their own self-interest, which also does work, that doesn't work there at all. I can't do it, because I cannot, like, I'm not really playing an evil character at that point. I'm playing like a reluctant hero or an anti-hero, someone who is, a little less morally compromised than everyone else, but it's still kind of there to do good things in general, right? And that is something that I need to know going into that game, so that I can maximize enjoyment for myself and not play a character that I'm handicapping, right before I get there, or ruining my friend's play experience. And that's an important thing to know. Also, yes, playing to lose is great. Just saw that in the comments. Yes, playing to lose is fantastic.
Does anyone else have anything to add? Because it's actually playing to lose is a great segue to accepting the consequences of your character. It's like I like to start with mine, knowing that my character was so bad. And like a couple of my Cthulhu characters, like one of them was secretly plotting against the group for their own self-interest. The other one just being a generally bad person. I was thinking, anything bad that happens to this character is well deserved. And with that mindset, you have to kind of be willing to accept that things aren't going to go happy. Like, you might not ever get an awesome redemption arc for your character. That, who knows, your character may even just be expelled from the group in game. You don't want to bring it to the point where it's actual game. And it's, just being able to internalize that there will be consequences for it can help. Like what kind of consequences have y'all faced with some of your characters? Or
So it wasn't my character. It was a character in a game that decided that they wanted to be chaotic, neutral, but did a really evil thing. And they, like, okay, so we were a spacefaring crew at the time, and my captain had a jar of these critters from a planet, and in their home planet, they're calm and docile creatures. Off their planet, They are an absolute nightmare, live underground, and are apex predators and will eat everything and everyone. And they were just like, you know what? This would be a good place to put them on a day that there was like someone's coronation happening. So I found out about that, and my character being they're like a neutral good character. So what happened was my character got angry about it, and when they found out, so after they finished disposing of these creatures, my very calm, very middle of the road as far as actions go, monk pulled out a weapon and like went after the captain. And after that whole thing settled, we ended up having to demote them from being the captain, and we ended up promoting the engineer. But that session was intense, and it's one of those, hey, if you're going to do evil things, you have to be kind of prepared for people are either going to want to fight you or they're going to put you in a corner for several years until you figure out what you're doing in character. Now, hopefully the communication was, works out well enough that you don't actually do that outside of game where it's like, no, I actually hate you. And if I see you in the street, it's on site. Like we don't want to be in those situations. But I mean, I think it was because there was so much communication that it didn't go there outside of game, but in game, like we were heated for an hour and then it was like, okay, everybody take a 15-minute break, go stretch. We're going to talk about some things. We're going to, everybody feels. And it's one of those, being evil or playing evil characters comes with consequences. And if you're not ready for having those heated moments and not having that bleed into your outside of game time, or if you know that those relationships at the table are things that you're going to take personally if they do certain things in character, then please do not do them.
Yeah. How about you, Werewolf? What kind of consequences have you ended up dealing with?
Actually, this is so. I'm going to open up with one of the greatest ways to help you along this process is by opening up with what with your GM, what the consequences you might want could be. So, for a while, I played a character that probably a lot of people in chat recognize well, John Constantine, in a DC game in a DC Heroes game. It wasn't actually the game DC Heroes, but that doesn't matter. And I decided after a while that, it was time to retire this character. He was starting to do some things that were counteracted to the party, but no one in the party, player wise, wanted him to leave. And I was thinking I could use this space to get a new character. So we discussed what, the plot that was going to happen. And the plot involved Lobo kidnapping John's son. And I said, if that should happen, he will likely disable or harm Lobo in a very dramatic, very dangerous way that which we haven't dealt with as characters before. And the GM agreed, and it happened. And what basically happened is John Constantine happened to own the Helm of Fate at the time. And he put the Helm of Fate on Lobo's head. And in game, what that meant is if the Helm of Fate does not like the person wielding it, it either kills the person or basically induces brain death. This is something we opened up with, okay, this is what this does in game to the other players around the table. Everyone consented. I put it on Lobo's head and boom, brain death. And the consequence was, even though some of the characters were like, no, we still love you, John, because poor them. It was all decided out of game that this was going to be John Constantine's last mission. Because at this point, his actions were very counter to what the character's actions were. And it made it very hard to continue on with them in the same space, at least for now. That was an evil act. I'm not saying John Constantine's an evil character. He is not. But it was a very evil act. And, the consequences were something that we discussed beforehand and accepted. And I think that's a great way to, if you're afraid of what consequences you might get as an evil character, talk with the GM, talk with the players about what you think you want to do and have them suggest consequences back before you even get there. You know, I talked before about how this is not a film, or like there's no script usually in a tabletop game. But this is a great way to have a scripted moment pre-planned, not necessarily right down to the wording or to the specifics, but to have the general idea pre-planned so no one's caught by surprise. And the best thing about that is you can go ham because you've been given leeway to do whatever the heck you wanted. Because I could have harmed Lobo in 1,000 different ways, and I had pure permission from the players to the GM to do whatever the hell I wanted to this villain, as much as I wanted. And that really opened up things, especially knowing that that was going to be my last game as John Constantine. So, like, that's the thing about communication. Communication is not just checking in with people, it is being proactive about discussing what you want and what they want and how those two things can coincide. So,
Anything you want to talk about in terms of consequences, John?
So I think this is a really good point to addressing the play to lose question we had earlier, because I think this is a good time to talk about, right?
Mm-hmm.
The sort of difference, the one thing that's sort of the difference between TTRPGs and LARP in terms of playing evil characters is that for LARPs and play to lose, you generally have a much bigger cast. And so there are people, and it's expected, there are people whose goals will not happen. You like a lot of specifically these secrets and power style games are a bunch of people trying to do conflicting goals who will inevitably run up against each other and either fight over something they need to finish their own goals, or their goals have already been finished, and in doing so they've closed off avenues for others. And that happens often, and playing to lose is fun because you know that there is an expectation that some people aren't going to get their goals done. That expectation is a lot less stringent in TTRPGs. Even most people who play TTRPGs in a campaign setting tend to kind of have the assumption that their characters are going to succeed at whatever it is they want to do, because that's generally the point. Now, I like playing to lose a lot from a GM perspective, where you are constantly pushing people to beat you, because that's fun for me. I'm a play to lose LARPer for sure, but really sort of someone else made a comment of I've been shifting it away from playing to lose and playing for story, and I think that's a better way to frame it. Is you're playing to create a cool story with somebody, not necessarily to roll a bunch of dice and win the game, right? Because I mean, you can win the game. That's really easy to do. There's a lot of really easy, there's optimization in a lot of new games, especially, is relatively easy. There's a lot of stuff that's extremely powerful that you can just take, but I personally find it way more fun to optimize my own story and telling the story that I want to do from a narrative point through the mechanical choices I make and through the role-playing choices I've made. So it is much easier to play to story than it is to play to lose in a tabletop game, but playing to story gives you the opportunity to lose in a meaningful way. Hashtag plug for Failing Forward, the panel I'm on later today. Right? But sometimes a lot of the things to remember is that failing in what you are doing can mean moving the story forward. I think one of the most fun things to do as a PC is to play an evil PC who is constantly failing at the expense of everything good happening, because that's a lot of fun. And you have to have a really strong reason for that kind of character to be in this party to begin with. But I am also the kind of player who will happily say, here's cool NPC, pull an Aaron Burr if you've watched Hamilton. Be there, be a hero, be a deuteragonist, but when the time comes, feel perfectly fucking free to be like, this PC is now the GM's, have fun, they've served the purpose that I've wanted to do here, I'd like to play something else. I think that's a really fun rule to think about. Because always, think about ways you can play something like Burr, who is clearly like the villain, but in a way that is fun. Yeah, I did see the question about how to like convince GMs to let you play an evil character. I think we'll tackle that later, but I wanted to acknowledge as seeing it because that is a question I've gotten a lot.
Yeah. If I may bounce back, one of like a good point about what John just said is that we're talking about accepting consequences as a player, accepting that your character has done something evil. This is actually there's a very good example of this in recent media where Adam Driver, the actor who played Kylo Ren, was in the news for talking about why his character did the things he did. And one of the things a lot of what he said and a lot of how it was framed, so it's not entirely his fault, was that, well, Han and Leia kind of ignored him his entire life. And on the surface, that feels fine, right? Like as a player playing a character, you get that, oh, it's not me, it's them. But as a actual player playing with other people, that's when you have to disassociate from that, from your in-game excuses, your in-game reasoning, and accept, yeah, no, Kylo Ren murdered a huge bunch of people. He's responsible for his own actions here. That's on him. We've talked a lot about so far about, safety. One of the most important things to do from a safety aspect is acknowledge the evil. You can't pretend like you're playing someone good when you're playing someone evil out of game, because what it does is it lowers the trust in you that the other players and the GM has, right? And developing that good player-to-player, player-to-GM relationship is a huge part of what it means to play an evil character safely and play them responsibly. So, I would caution, if you're going to come up with in-game reasonings, and I think we all do, but if you're going to come up with in-game reasonings for your actions, I would caution you to think out of game, a bit more critically about it.
Right. Like that's where we should stay away from the idea of that's what my character would do, because that in itself is not justification for your character. That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't even mean you know why or for what reasons your character is going about it, just that it's doing it, which, I guess evil characters don't necessarily have to have a purpose, but there still needs to be some sort of understanding that just because that's what your character would do doesn't mean that there won't be consequences for it.
Yeah.
And an added point while we're talking about evil characters and stuff, because they're PCs, you are making these PCs, whatever motivations they have or motivations that you are actively making. Please do not make terrible motivations and then just go, well, nothing I could do about that if they're especially harmful.
Yeah, like if like regardless of what, like, okay, so what my character can do, like it's what my character would do, is a cohesive response for the point of if you wrote a character and then everyone knew that was going to happen, because if you like, that's a thing that exists. What it doesn't do is excuse you choosing to play it in the first place. And like and also and Thread had a really good point of, like, they were playing a character that was, like, that started out as a hero and got worse and worse and worse and worse and like became, much more of an anti-hero, jaded kind of character. And they said it ended with dishonorable discharge execution. Sometimes that's where the story ends. Like, if you don't, you can have a character whose entire point is you don't want them to be redeemable. Like, I've done that a lot. Like, one of the most evil, like, morally completely deficient characters I've ever played in a LARP was a straight up Fae who was irredeemable due to the fact that they did not care. Like, they were just a narcissistic, manipulative motherfucker, and that was okay, because everyone knew that, and I was extremely upfront about it to people who I was going to be primarily interacting with in that LARPing sense. And we all knew that was the point. The point was we were all playing, like most of us were playing Fae in that game. And because of that, we all knew we were not going to care about redemption, quote unquote. We were going to be who we were and suffer the consequences of it in whatever ways that happened. And because of that, that freed us to give the ability to have really tough, really hard in-character conversations, especially because, like, my character, for all of, you know, their evil, really liked this other character, and they consider them one of their best friends, and they were having like a moral, they were having like a do I do this or do I do this moment. I'm not sure what the answers would be. And my character's response was, fucking you do you. Like, you're just gonna do this anyway. That's what I would do. This insert horrible thing that they had been thinking of doing. Like, it doesn't matter what happens. We need to win. So win. That's the whole point. And because we can have those difficult conversations, we can have moments leading up to more drama later, but everyone in it knows that what we're doing is, like, awful. And that's fine. But, like, you need to know that ahead of time, because we're still choosing to, like, the point is choice. We are still, like, in acting, you can choose to take on a role, especially if now, whether or not people will tell you the extent of how bad that role will be later on is questionable, and even in the acting industry. But the point is, you still have a choice to say, I've seen some of this character, I've seen the script, cool, I'm good. You don't have that much choice in a TTRPG because so much of it is improv, which means you need to A, really trust your group and really be solid with them, or B, do a lot of extra work if you're not, and even then do some work.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Right. And a lot of this, how dealing with your character and, you know, the possible consequences. Actually, someone in chat mentioned how when they play evil characters, they end up feeling a lot of bleed, things like that. Like we were saying, like when you're playing an evil character, it leads to possibly isolating, to because maybe you're the only truly evil character at your group, you know. And so, like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, so we've talked about checking in with other players. We should really talk about checking in with yourself, because you are a player. And even though you're playing this person and you decided to play this person and you are committed to playing this person, that does not mean that you are not affected by their actions and that you personally aren't going to feel bad when something happens in game. You should always be in contact with yourself and ask, are you enjoying your character? Are you enjoying playing them? Are you having fun? And if the answer is no, talk to your GM, talk to the other players about how to play someone else or how to change the character to better fit what would make you have fun. Because here's the thing, if you're experiencing a lot of bleed and you're experiencing a lot of pain, you are not going to play that character as effectively as you might want to. And you might end up passing on some of that pain to other people. More importantly, it's a game. You shouldn't be in pain. You shouldn't be experiencing a lot of, anger at yourself. That's not cool, right? I would recommend, there's a lot of ways to manage bleed out there. Definitely look into many of them and try to see what works for you. What works for you for playing a good character might be different from playing an evil character, but either way, it's about how to handle traumatic events in game and not have them pass on to you out of game. Because what evil characters often do are traumatic.
Right. Does anyone want to add on to like I feel like this is a lot of part where you want to be able to play at a table with people you trust. Like coming in with an evil character at a table where you don't know anyone may not be the greatest idea, because you need to be able to communicate with them what is going on with them and with yourself. You know? So,
Okay, we're all good with that. Cool.
Yeah, I think so. And awesome, cool. So everyone, mostly people seem to know what bleed is, which is great. The one thing I will say too is, like, sometimes, and like, bleed can be good sometimes, right? Like, that's a good thing to note. Is like bleed is not necessarily a thing you want to keep boxed off in like a nice tidy "this is my character forever" box, because there are a lot of people who gained a lot by playing characters, right? Like that's like my entire thing, right, is the way to do that, and a way to like learn how to do things through a character with enough distance that you have the ability to do it, and then look back at it and went, wait, hold on, no, I did that. That was me. I did that. Like, regardless of whether or not the character did it or not, I was playing them in that moment, which meant you had the capacity to do it, as either as part of a story. So, and like also, and again, like a lot of people saying, your job is to really sort of keep an eye on, like as a player, keep an eye on your players, but also keep an eye on yourself, because if you're uncomfortable with something that's happening and you don't realize it, it's gonna build, right? It's just gonna, like, something will feel off, and you won't know what it is, and then you'll figure it out, and that can be very unfortunate. And if you are if you're running a game, if you're telling a story together, again, remember, you can just, if you don't want to do it anymore, you can give it up. You can walk away from something. That is okay. Like, nobody, you should not feel pressure to, and hopefully no one at the table pressures you to stick with a character that you are no longer comfortable playing, because you can just give it to the GM and they can show up later as an antagonist. That's my favorite twist, if you get the chance to do that. Like, if you just, one of the NPCs in my current campaign is someone who like was one of the best friends of an NPC that like someone else that a whole bunch of the party really got attached to. So they met this other person by proxy, and then like they died, and that caused a whole lot of issues. And now a whole bunch of them are going down really awkward paths because they all feel really guilty, and they all collided again when we started season 2, and half of them hate each other. 2 of them are like absolutely dead set on never talking to each other again. But because of that, the ways in which they go about things now is very different. And so they have to learn to reorganize with each other around this event that had happened. Because some of them are turning slightly more towards like what we would consider evil, in terms of like just wanton murder. Like very, it's kind of like Hawkeye without like the hand-waved redemption arc in Avengers. Because he doesn't get one, he just kind of is there. Right, like like the whole Hawkeye thing just happens and everyone's like, nah, it's fine. Like, what? Anyway,
there's a reason why everyone thinks he's fine, and we all know what that is.
Yeah.
This group knows what that is.
Yeah.
I'm not staring at this fan that I have over here to my left. I am absolutely not.
But, and that's the kind of thing, right? Is, yeah, right. Pre-crisis and post-crisis gaming is like, that is the crux of the point, right? Is you have someone who has done something inexplicably evil, and you need to reckon with what that means for the characters, for the story, for your players. If your players are all fine, fan-fucking-tastic. Keep reckoning with what that is for the characters. That's cool. But if someone is just like, I don't know, well, maybe you don't keep the crisis going as long. Maybe you snap it again and rewind, right? And you can do that. Actually, that's a really good metaphor. Thank you, whoever brought up the Avengers thing. That was me. I'm tanking myself live on a stream. Moving on. Holy crap, is it 11?
No, it's not. It's 10:48.
It's getting there.
So,
but
yeah.
Reckon with what that means to your players, because that can be a lot of fun to explore if everyone's on board.
Oh, I really like, important thing to mention. Whatever happens, do not resist the urge to isolate.
Oh yeah.
You are playing with a bunch of other great people, right? That's just a fact. If you're playing an RPG or a LARP and you're, playing something like this on an ongoing basis, you're playing with some amazing people. Talk to them. Please, you have resources. Don't just sit there alone in the dark. I've done that. The reason why I'm saying that is because I've done that.
Don't do it.
No, especially if you're going through other traumatic things in real time and you're dealing with this. It can be extremely overwhelming, and the more you resist, the reality that you're going to need to talk to someone about it, the more damage you're going to do to yourself. And that's never the start of good play, ever.
Syn, you have any examples of bleed and dealing with all that?
Oh, of bleed. Most of the good news is most of the examples I have of bleed are are pretty good. I had, except for the one that wasn't. In the one that wasn't, I had a paladin who felt terrible because a new player came into the group that we were in. And this is okay. So, me being a paladin was the following: a person ran out into a market and tried to assassinate me. Um, that assassination attempt failed, but then I was just kind of like, all right, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to find out why you were here, and then I am going to just, go somewhere and stop doing terrible things. Right? This is that was me. So I attempted to do this. Now, other party members were just like, well, we'd like to ask them a couple of questions. I have some means to be persuasive to do that. And I was just kind of like, okay, but I'm very much set on you not killing them in this process. And they was like, it's fine, I won't. And they didn't. That person kept their promise to me. But the new person who came in promptly walked in with the trident and struck them dead. And my character felt terrible. Like they didn't have a means to like take them anywhere. The die just did not work for them that day. And because the place that they were in was an Arctic permafrosted area, they didn't have a place to try to even bury him that day. So they were distressed. And normally they're the very like upbeat, warm, cheerful person. So when they walked past everybody in utter silence, people were fighting as he left the room for the time being. And we had to take another one of those, here's a 15-minute thing to kind of talk about it. And then after that session, we were just like, is everybody okay? And I'm like, let me process that. And came back 2 days later and I'm just like, my character is sad. I'm sad. Why did people do this type of thing? Also, hey, this is one of those things that happens when you don't tell people, hey, I'm going to walk in and kill the person you're trying to protect. But so they were just like, well, this is the thing that my character wanted to do. And the DM, thankfully, kind of stepped in and was kind of like, okay, so what do we want to do here or change about the sequence of events? Because this person's not going to be here, but we can have this whole thing. So it became one of those situations of learning how I failed to protect a person, but there's something I learned because of it that gave me some perspective. It ended up well, but boy, that 2 days of bleed in between then was like, I don't know if anybody here knows who Bill Withers is, but hearing Ain't No Sunshine in the background for like 2 days while I'm just like staring at the blank wall in my room and being, it was just one person. It was just, I was like, I have powers that I don't have the ability to protect anyone with them. I am failing. And trying to go through the mini arc of fixing that part of things ended up being a lot of fun, but that hurt. That hurt. And it's one of those, this is why regular constant communication and safety tools is such an important thing, because being able to go, I can talk this out and we can work through that and we can change stuff rather than just being like, well, I guess we're just going to be miserable now, is a really good way to go.
Right. That's actually a good segue for bringing up, like, in the event where you need to change up characters, a character has to go given to the GM, like having backup plans and whatnot. Like, how do you go about that? You know?
So I start every game where I play an evil character by going to the GM and saying, so as a note, if at any point this becomes too much for the table, and I fully acknowledge it might, they're yours to take. Like, because I also approach PCs, and I approach PCs the same way I build fucking, like, NPCs, which is sometimes really cool and sometimes really bad. Because I like to play characters that have story influence and have, like, beats and things they want to do. That's the kind of thing I want to play for the most part, because I like influencing world. I like driving other people's stories, all these other things. And that's kind of the way I play. And so I always have a backup plan for Like, here's a character that I've played. Here's a character I might play if things go badly, and I will always, and I sort of keep that secondary character updated as the game progresses, and I'll change them a little bit based on events that happen to make them relevant to the story that we've got. But I always have at least one character in the backup of an evil character, where I can play them should I choose to, should the table be like, all right, we have had enough of this, and I'll be like, excellent, either we kill them, which is fine, or we give them to the GM. And that might involve killing them and bringing them back later in a completely different aspect. And sometimes that's a really fun thing to do, because then you have evil that you're set up with, which is your party is okay with this character, being an evil character, because they've clearly said they are. They just don't want to play with it, and playing against it can be very, very fun.
And cathartic in some cases.
Extremely cathartic in some cases.
Your character is a jerk, and I want to kill them now.
Yeah, and sometimes that's really cool to do if you just be like, you know what, have at it, like, go. Yeah. Like, this is the problem, right? Is like. Really quick, I want to double back because some of the people talking about sort of bleed and playing evil characters. How many people tried to sit through like a renegade playthrough of Mass Effect and about halfway through went, actually, I'm good. I'm okay. I'm fine. We're punching reporters now. Like, I'm good. This is way more not than what I wanted.
John, did you really have to call me out?
Yes. Because I did that. Like, I started with the renegade options. I got 3 options in and was like, wow, never mind. Nope, we're going for a balance here. We're not picking either one of those things. Because, like, you can be like, I'm going to play evil. And about halfway through being like, actually, I'm good. Actually, no, thank you. So that's, I think that's really important.
This story is now is redemption.
Yep.
I have seen that happen in real time, but unfortunately in that scenario, it was a person who was just like, it was another Star Wars thing. They were just like, we're all Sith here. And one of the characters realized about halfway through, like, I can't do it, but didn't want to tell people that they couldn't do it because they were just like, well, we've committed this game to playing Sith and it's supposed to be a Sith game, so I don't know what I'm going to do if I'm not that. And it's one of those, just tell people this isn't fun anymore, and then don't do the not fun thing, because now everybody is like sad and you are like acting out in character against people because you're actually angry at them.
We need to play Star Wars together, Syn. It's just making me want to play Star Wars with you.
I mean,
the other thing is like individual acts are not. This is a live game, right? Even if you're not filming it, this is a live game. You can always stop, rewind, start over. And this is like, generally, this is how the X card works, right? Someone's like, oh no, this is bad. I cannot handle this right now. Tapping the X card. And you're like, oh, what's the problem? You rewind, you start over and change it to something else. You can take that concept and really make it how you play when it comes to being an evil character. You just need to be having an open mind, be flexible, and if you're going to do something really terrible, have a backup plan. Maybe killing someone's entire family is too much for your fellow players right now. So instead, what you're going to do is you're going to kill that NPC's family. See, fixes everything. It's still terrible, but it fixes everything. That's the general idea when you're playing a character in general, evil or not. Always stay kind of loosey-goosey, always, be ready to change your mind. But when you're playing an evil character, it's really important that you're aware of the fact that lines and veils can change in mid-scene, or you can be aware of something in mid-scene. I learned that I cannot handle gigantic spiders in game during a game. That's okay. Just learn to rewind to change it, or to, decide, oh, this is the moment where I grow as a character, or to decide, this is the moment where I don't want to play this character anymore. But you always have to be aware of, having some form of backup plan, having a way to move on. Because the one thing you're going to have to keep cognizant of is this is a game. It does need to continue moving. That doesn't mean that you need to ignore what happened. It means that you need to consider, should I have something planned just in case this is too much? And in general, that's the thing about, playing a game over long term. Sometimes you're playing a game and something that was okay last session isn't okay this session because something personal happened or someone's really, having not a great time out of game. And you got to be aware of that. And you got to have the ability to just say, okay, it doesn't happen then, and move on. Did someone suggest gigantic centipede? No, that is not cool. More legs is not cool. I do not accept this.
Oh, does anyone have anything else to add about having backup plans? Continuing on when things maybe go a bit awry.
I think there's I guess the backup plans, I guess, would be just one of those most extreme cases. I guess the other thing too, and I don't know if how many times we mentioned this, but like these things that we talked about with like safety and communication and things like that should be regular and ongoing things. Like not even just like during session things or during session 0 things, but just, hey, in the middle of a week, I was thinking about the game we had the other day
and. Yeah. Just that idea of constant communication, like making sure that you're able to communicate with your table and just keep it ongoing and keep it up because you never know when something may happen. But once all that's said and done, in the end, you're playing this character to have fun. So how do you have fun with your evil characters now?
This is the moment we've all been waiting for.
Yep. So I mean, if so, let's say you've done all of the work, everyone's on board, you're playing within boundaries and pushing them to have fun. Lean into it. Just like if you're gonna do it, do it. Because there is a lot of fun and freedom to be found in playing someone that you absolutely would never want to meet. So affably evil characters are some of my favorite kinds to play. The ones that are friendly and polite and will like have lunch with you and have a drink with you. But at the end of the day, they're still going to do horrible, awful things. And those are the kinds of ones that I find really fun because there is a freedom in doing whatever you want that I don't get to have. There are certain things I cannot do because, like, for example, as in society and such. But like, everyone has had that moment where you've seen someone say something and you're like, I just want to punch you in the face, like right now, just like and you're not going to do it, hopefully. But like, it's fun to play those games where you can just punch somebody in the face for doing something awful, or doing something that you don't agree with. Because if you're playing an evil character, and the fun part, what's really fun, and one of the most, like, I think, consistent ways to play evil is play evil that is opposed to other evil. Like, play evil that has a code, and everyone who breaks that is just like, there's a line we draw here, and you've crossed that line. And I will do the things necessary to make sure you don't cross that line again. That's very fun to play. Anybody who's watched Dexter, you get the idea. So, like, that's kind of the thing that we get to. Evil with standards. Like, lawful evil is... I don't actually know if it's lawful evil, because it doesn't necessarily care about, like, the rule of law and order. It specifically cares about the things that break it. It's closer to neutral, if we're going with the axis, where it cares about the code that it cares about and not about anything else.
It could sometimes be as simple as, this evil person is doing evil that interferes with my evil. Thus, get rid of them.
Yep.
I think the types of evil that I have the most fun with are more insidious. So I think like my favorite evil character was an instructor, just a teacher. So it's kind of like well, hey there, kiddos. Just very charismatic people. Hey there, kiddos. We're getting ready to go on a field trip and stuff, and are 12 of you over here. So let's take a look at the ship that we're going into and the venue that we're checking out and all this other stuff. Venue is all like nice and leafy and green and tropical. And so it's like, okay, well, let's take a look at the ship that we're on. And we pull up the ship schematics, and it's kind of like, oh, well, we only have 6 seats on the ship, and there are significantly more than 6 of you. You know, I feel like negotiations need to happen here. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to let you talk that out, and I'm just going to step out of the room over here and have like a wee bit of coffee. When I come back, you know, we'll just take whomever has decided that they wanted to go. And I just leave. Like, I am the most fun kind of evil is just the things where it's kind of like, if I examine this closely enough, I know that you're responsible for it somehow, but I don't know exactly what you did to make it that way. Mm-hmm. We know you did something. What did I do? I was just sitting here with a cup of coffee. I left and I came back and 6 students were just not here. I can't be responsible for everything that people do when I'm not in a room.
I'm a fan of like the kind of evil that will hold your hand in both of theirs and say, hey, I understand, just don't make me kill you, okay? Because like I love that kind of,
yes, that works.
Yeah, it's just like parental almost.
Yeah,
it's like it's your mother, but if your mother was actually the worst person alive, it's
patronizing
wonderful.
Evil is fun. So, and that's the thing, right? Patronizing evil is really fun because you are, in a sense, taking away agency while leaving the illusion of agency. It's, if you keep going, I'm not going to have any choice. Right,
yeah.
like that's a lot of fun because you're leaving the quote unquote choice to somebody, but really what you're saying is here's a warning for the thing I know you're going to do eventually, but you can't say I didn't warn you. And that is,
do what I want or else.
Yeah.
See, that part is the best part. It's kind of like, you can't say I didn't tell you that this was going to happen. You know, I'm just simply doing what I told you I was going to do. This isn't a surprise.
Yep.
This hurts me much more than it hurts you.
Yep. Yeah. Or like my specific kind is play the kinds of evil that see evil in other players and in the other characters. Play the kind of evil that's like, oh, I know you didn't have a choice. It must be hard failing all the time. You know, or like one of the okay, if you are one of my players and you are watching this video, stop now for 5 minutes. Because we're going to talk.
Okay, bye now.
Yeah, when we switched in the campaign that I'm running, when we switched over, there were there's the NPC that is coming back, and the reason why is because they have had a long-standing grudge against the NPC all of the other players love, because they've gotten like promoted and gotten things and become powerful in the world, and they don't want it, and this character has been struggling to get it and has never gotten it. Ooh. So they got the opportunity to get power, came and are coming back, and one of the characters meets this character in like they have a dream link, meets the character in the dream, and they're like, you know, I wish you could come back because I really, you know, the person that they hate misses you, and for all they think that they're close. And that in the dream, it ends with like, you know, flashing lights and big ominous things. And the other person just goes, not everything is about them, and cuts off everything. And because you want to play specifics, don't like Mustache Twirling Evil has great fucking potential. Like, you know, like big, I have an evil plan. Like, if you've ever read, it's called The Practical Guide to Evil. Every Dread Emperor in that series has their own motif. Dread Emperor Traitorous leads constant coups against himself just to get rid of his own enemies ahead of time. Dread Emperor Irritant succeeds by doing nonsense. For example, one of my favorite villain lines from that book is an epitaph of Dread Emperor Irritant, and all it says is, "Well, you wouldn't kill me. You came here to kill the dread Emperor of Praise, and he's already abdicated. I am but now a humble shoemaker, and what kind of hero kills a shoemaker? And then the bit on the end is Dread Emperor Irritant, noted later to have made surprisingly good shoes during his 3 abdications. Like, he just kept constantly abdicating the throne to save himself, because heroes in that world, to be heroes, have to do heroic things, and killing a shoemaker is not actually a heroic thing to do.
Oh, boy.
But also, like, play the kind of one that is, like, bumbling evil. Bumbling evil is really fun. Another one, Dread Emperor Irritant, is lo and behold, I fear not your burning light, for I am already on fire. Like, that's the kind of great stuff that you can play. Someone who is just so irritatingly successful at everything they do. They don't deserve it, they shouldn't have it, and yet here we are.
No.
Yeah.
I think overall what we're saying is there are so many flavors of evil. Why didn't you just go have a taste of all of them? Whether you want to be a cackling kind of evil, or you want to be a paternal, patronizing kind of evil, or you just want to stab people. There's such a big world out there. And I encourage you to just chase after it, or I will kill you.
Right. That being said, for those of you who are wondering, the reason why we leave this to the end is it is very, very easy to talk about how fun it is to play evil characters.
Oh, yeah.
But we wanted to show you there's like an hour worth of homework for the 10 minutes of advice we just gave. Like, that is the kind of work ratio that we're looking at, right? Is you need to be aware of the kind of things your players find fun. You need to be aware of the kind of things that your players find useful. The only reason that this villain works in the campaign I'm running is because 2 of the players specifically have in their stories about agency and becoming their own person. One of them literally has an overbearing fey godmother who won't leave them alone, and their whole story arc in the first season was getting their parent to recognize that they are their own person and don't need them, like, protecting them. And the only reason that this villain works is because that is how they died. Is because someone was trying to protect them and they tried to sneak out to be their own person and got killed for it. And they are mad. Those story beats only matter if you link them to the things that your players are curious and want to explore themselves. Because then the fun part of evil is you can hold up the mirror to your players and say, see what could have happened if you had gone a little differently. That's the fun part to play, I think, for me.
Yeah.
And again, like, I'm a GM. So that's the lens I come from.
I'm a player. I just come from, it's a lot more fun to watch people's slowly horrified faces if they knew it was coming. They knew it was coming. They're still shocked. How wonderful.
That for the experience I've had with evil characters has always been like my favorite part of things. Even when you tell people this is where I'm going. Even when you give them plenty of warning, even when you do the check-ins and regular communications and you're having fun, people will still just be like, I was not prepared. Just I'm going to need a moment. And you're just like, but we told you, we handed you a script. And it's one of those, if you think, oh, well, if we communicate things and tell people, it's not gonna have the same kind of element of fun or surprise or any of that stuff. Allow me to tell you that is patently false. You can tell people well ahead of time exactly how this is going to go, and they will still just be like, but gas, and mind you, actually mean it, just have no idea, because telling someone something doesn't necessarily prepare you for how it will feel in the moment that it happens. Almost as a rule. So you can have all of that.
Yep. Really quick example, if you look at my background, this is from a movie called Knives Out. It is a very, very good, modern detective noir story. The twist is dropped 5 minutes into the movie, and they spend the rest of the movie telling you how it happened. And your mind is still blown because there are so many moving pieces that you're being introduced to, even though you know inevitably how it is actually going to end. Because the convoluted nonsense leading up to that end is still something that you want to watch. And there is a really great line from this, from the noir style storytelling, which is the best plot is the one that makes good scenes. A good detective story is the one that you would read if the ending was missing.
Mm-hmm.
And the point is to tell everybody what the ending is so that they know, so you can have all the scenes leading up to it without a problem.
All right. I think with that, we're going to move on to some of the chat questions we've had. From, let's see, Interberna Quandus.
Interberna quando sumnus. That's
There we
Latin.
go.
I think that's when we're in a tavern for Latin too. That's Carmina Burana, I think.
Says, do you design
Sorry,
your evil characters with
I'm an opera
chaotic...
kid, sorry.
No worries. So do you all design your characters with a chaotic lawful axis in mind?
I do, surprisingly. So I know that it's not necessarily for everybody, but it gives me a really good idea of how I want to portray this character in terms of how they feel about, not necessarily how they are as a character, but about how they feel on societal things, which is more of a, do they care about the rules or not, or only where it serves them type of things. And that's kind of what I aim for when I'm dealing with that whole access. Are they more like outgoing or selfless or altruistic as a person, or are they more just, I mean, as long as I get mine, I don't care. I don't care.
Mm.
And that's what I end up using it for most of the time.
I don't generally. I'm more of the there's a reason why I don't, because I don't think like laws and chaos are necessarily like against each other, especially who defines those things. But that's another panel. What I'll say is this: are they methodical, or are they so insistent that it almost seems like they're all over the place? That's how I usually like make decisions about how methodical are they.
Mm-hmm.
I don't consciously use the axis. I use some of the concepts in it to inform what I'm doing, but it's not something I really think about in terms of like what their alignments are and what their axes are. I'm much more interested in the reasons why they do things. For example, like you could put a lot of fictional characters on the axes, right? But like though even among the axes, they have very different reasons for the reasons why they do things. You could theoretically classify like Vader as lawful evil because in the world he lives in, the laws support him and what he's doing, right? And for the same reason, you could put the operative from Serenity into lawful evil. He does like the laws, because the law allows him to do the things that he is doing. He is technically aligned with society, but the reasons why, like Darth Vader does it because he hands the law out. He is essentially, for intense purposes in the story he shows up in, the law of the Sith manifested as a person, sort of wandering and dispensing that kind of arbitrary justice in that way. The operative Serenity fully knows that what he's doing is evil, but is content in doing it because he aims for a world where that law is no longer needed. Those are two extremely different character motivations, and they're still technically within the lawful evil axis, right? And I find the alignment is a good starting point if you're not sure where to go from there, but it's not something I use to inform it, just because I skip the step and move on to the things I find really interesting. You are muted.
Indeed, I am. I tend to go more along on the lines of just general motivations, like what my either overall character concept or what's happened in this story that seems to be driving them towards that. Like I try not to say, oh, they're like this or like that. I try to go with more of like how I go about life. You know, if something happens, usually it's either reactionary or methodical. So that's when I'm making my characters, they're usually along that path somewhere. It's like it feels more like, oh, of course that's the direction they would go. Yeah. So anything else to add to that? Or
No, I think we should move on.
And from Three-Eyed Magpie, he's like, how do you keep the narrative consistent with characters that started off as heroes but become jaded by repeated failure and getting backed into a corner?
Is that narrative inconsistent though? Like, I think that's just the narrative you're telling. Like, the narrative is still a consistent one. Like, you've got a bunch of people who started out as heroes, they're becoming jaded and not necessarily heroes anymore, like straight up. And I think that's fine, right? Like, that's a narrative. If that's a narrative you're willing to sit with and play with as a GM, and this is kind of the important part of knowing what kind of stories you're comfortable telling. If you and your players want to do that, if they want to play this more jaded game as they like progress, that's fine. If you want to keep the narrative consistent with being heroic, give them chances to be heroes, and then do a little fudging with your DCs. Like, because you're a GM, you arbitrarily set your success rates for what is going to happen. Feel free to do that. Now, and the one thing I will note is that, again, fail them forward sometimes. If they fail a check, give them the opportunity to do it, but they've complicated it for themselves. Having complicated success is often more interesting than like player
Failure.
Like complicated success is generally better than just outright failure. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for, the one I just said. Oh my god. It is definitely past 11 now, but this is one of the games, for example, that I've stopped playing a lot of like the D20 and D6 D10 roller systems, and I'm playing a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse because I don't do anything as a GM. None of my things are opposed dice rolls. I never roll dice that is higher than my players. Everything my players do is on them. Again, it's a little evil. You're giving them the illusioncy and agency of choice because every roll they make is what impacts the story. Because all you do is say, this happens. What did you do about it? And that's kind of, and evidently that becomes way more fun for some people sometimes. It's just like, shit, my dice screwed me over, but it wasn't my dice screwed me over because the GM set it really high and I didn't roll high enough. It was my dice screwed me over. And now this little text box says, well, if now that I've done that, this is how I've fucked up. And it's nice sometimes to have that structure for what fucking up can look like.
I remember that. This will come up later, but yeah, like complicated successes are fun, but at first, when you're not prepared for them, they're terrifying because you're just like, wait, so this isn't success or failure. We're in between here. Which one of these things did I do? And the answer is yes.
Yep. Go for it.
No, I was just going to ask if Werewolf, was there anything you wanted to say?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Just give in to the desperation. Just play that up. Have fun with it. If you're failing that much, chase after desperation a little bit.
There is one quick note I want to say.
Sure.
For Mr. Dragon. The narrative is player driven, so if the characters get jaded, doesn't that necessarily change the narrative? The answer is sometimes. The narratives are player driven, but it is important to remember that as a GM, be conscious of the story that you want to tell, because a lot of GMs will have stories they want to tell, and a lot of players will be perfectly happy to experience whatever the story is for the GM. Don't change the narrative. You don't need to change the narrative just because the dice are fucking you over that day. It is fun to lean into that if you're all ready to deal with what that means. But it is something, again, be aware of how your table plays. Be aware of how your players are. If they just want to find a fun story, give them the chance to experience that fun story. Some people just want to be like told a movie, and that's a perfectly legitimate way to play these games.
Right. All right, so our final question from Nightshade 1949. My DM doesn't let anybody play evil characters. How can I convince him to let me play one? Be nice, he's in the room watching me.
Can you believe what Nightshade just said about you, DM?
There's a great, so I was watching some of the chat around this question show up, and I wanted to jump back to it. At some point somebody said, explore the reasons why you want to play an evil character first. That's super important. Why do you want to play an evil character? I think the point of, well, I think I might want to do it because I'm not allowed to. Okay. Which is like, I get that. Doing things out of spite is basically my entire brand, but
making notes.
look, gun monks. Okay, like gun monks and spite is my entire brand essentially. The entire reason that there is gun monks exist is because what WotC has simultaneously decided that the rules that monks can use are arbitrary, and the rules that guns have in D&D are arbitrary. And I hate both of those things, and both of those things are actually things that existed. But the point being is that you need to look at why you do those things, because it's really important. And yes, doing something out of spite stops working when they allow it, because then you're just like, well, that's but then you're kind of like, yay, cool, now I can just do the thing. It doesn't have to be spiteful anymore. That's very nice. But it's important to know why you want to play an evil character, because I just want to play an evil character, to me, is not really a good enough reason to play an evil character at the table that I'm running. If you're like, I want to do story things with it, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm thinking, this is how I want to affect things, cool, let's talk about that. But I wanna doesn't give me as a GM any room to sort of explore that, because I don't know what you're thinking. What is evil to you? What is your goals? What do you want to do with it? Those are all very different things.
Think about the themes and actions you want to play out, right? Don't be that kid who looks at a cake in a bakery box and says, oh, I really want that cake, and then have that cake and realize that it was awful, and it's just an awful taste. That was me when I was 5, to be fair. Literally, like, there was a cake in the bakery store. It was covered with fondant. That's how we discovered I hate fondant. So,
well, there you go.
Yeah, just spite it's a great motivator. It's not a great reason, is what I'd say.
So I would say, if you're, maybe the question that you should be asking isn't if you can do something, but asking your GM kind of what their experiences are, right? If I am like, hey, I don't want to play games where I have evil characters, there are very specific reasons for this. You can't just like play evil characters at any table with any random group of people. That requires a lot of trust. That requires a certain kind of bond. If you can't ask your DM to take their sense of safety and ignore that because you have a certain kind of character you would like to play. So talk to them about that. When we talk about all the safety stuff, that's for everybody, and that includes your DMs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like it all comes back to communication with you and your table. So really playing an evil character is a lot of communication, and you have to be prepared for that. You have to be ready to be able to communicate with your GM, the rest of the players, and with yourself. So I think that's where we're going to end it at this point. So let's start with some outros. We can let's go in the opposite direction. Werewolf.
Hello. You can find me at Werewolf Feels on Twitter. My name is Adam Ali. Please do not call me Adam. I hate it when people do that. Next thing you can find me on is actually an LGBT plus in tabletop panel that you'll find on the Tabletop Gamers channel. You can also find me on the Asians Represent channel, critically reading a Kindred of the East, I repeat, oof, and Al-Qadim specifically every third Saturday of the month. The next one's August 15th. The next subject is honor. I am already dying internally.
Oh no! Oh no!
Syn.
So I'm Synziak. You can find me on the Twitters at Synziak Beta. You can also find me hanging out with a couple of people like John down here at 4, where we're talking about failing forward. So you get to hear stories about things I'm good at 4 p.m.
And John.
Yeah, hello. Again, like Syn just said, you can find me on the next panel at 4 p.m. That's our last panel today, Failing Forward. We're going to talk about those, complicated successes / failing for plot that we were talking about earlier at the very end here. All of my stuff in the Twitch chat that ways, because I don't know what side anything is on when it's mirrored. Is all that stuff. I helped found the Role Initiative, which is a nonprofit that runs organized used to run organized play before our current world state. At major conventions, we ran Adventures League for PAX East and PAX Unplugged, as well as numerous other conventions in the Northeast and across the country. And then also, I am a founding member of the Academy for Virtual and Role-Playing Arts at Lesley University, which is where I'm currently studying to get my master's, with the focus on using LARP and tabletop RPG games as therapeutic tools. So a lot of the safety stuff and group dynamics comes out of that place for me.
All right. And I am Wild Engineer. You can find me at Wild Engineer on Twitter for to see what projects and games I'm in. So thank you all for watching.
They also want to meet your kitten. They want to meet the cat, which I believe is across the room now.
Yeah. They have their own personalities, none of which agree with streaming. So thank you all for coming and watching us talking about how to play evil. If you have tickets, please make sure to turn them in, and come back to Huetopia at 4 p.m. for Failing Forward, 4 p.m. Eastern.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I want to rate Gen Con.
Yeah.
Rating.
Yes,
That's
and we're
right.
going to rate Gen Con.
Yep, there's a Root live play happening in about half an hour, so stick around for some more tabletop content. Stuff's happening.